Hello and welcome to Crime Watch Daily Updates. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. If money is the root of all evil, then Nathan Carman allegedly knows a thing or two. Nathan came from a wealthy family and stood to inherit millions. But that impatience of his got him into trouble. In November of 2013, Nathan reportedly bought a rifle. A month later, Nathan's grandfather, John Chakalos, was fatally shot while he slept in his Connecticut home. Nathan reportedly received about $500,000 after his grandfather died and then moved back to his home state of Vermont. He has not been charged in connection with his grandfather's death. But in September of 2016, Nathan and his mother went out on a fishing trip to Rhode Island. While on their excursion, the boat sank and only Nathan survived. He tried filing an insurance claim on the boat, but the judge denied him the $85,000 that he requested. In May of 2022, Nathan was arrested on an 8-count indictment, including murder on the high seas and other fraud-related charges. He will appear in federal court. Nathan's grandfather, who was a real estate developer, reportedly had an estate worth almost $30 million. Linda Carman inherited about $7 million, and as her heir, Nathan stood to gain those funds when she died. Nathan remains in federal custody and could face life in prison if he is convicted. Let's take a look back at the case of a young man and his alleged hunt for inheritance money.
A nightmare on the high seas.
The boat started taking on water.
Shrouded in mystery.
When you talk with local fishermen, that's not of the norm.
Begging the question, was this boating accident really an accident at all? Some say it's the perfect storm of money and murder, but you never would have known it to see 54-year-old Linda Carman and her 22-year-old son Nathan that weekend.
Fishing was one of the few things that Linda could do with her son.
It's a rare and cherished connection for Linda after her son was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism.
Linda was trying to find ways to spend time with her son. Was boating something she was into, enjoyed?
The irony is, no, Linda actually didn't like to fish, but it was the only way that she could spend quality time with her son.
Nathan was eager to go, but before she left, Linda checked in with her roommate Monty Monterio to tell him she'd be fishing in a new spot just off the Rhode Island coast. And just where is this new spot?
They were actually going to be going on a fishing trip about 20 miles off the coast.
An area known as Block Island, as confirmed in a text from Linda to her good friend Sharon Hartstein. Linda texts Sharon that she plans to leave late Saturday night and return Sunday morning. Then Linda ends her message with these haunting words: "Call me 12 noon if you don't hear from me." But by daybreak on Sunday, their boat, a 31-foot aluminum vessel called Chickenpox, is way off course.
100 miles off the coast.
And
The boat started taking on water.
that's when the unthinkable happens. With 2 souls on board,
The boat is sinking.
then 8 days later, a Chinese freighter called the Orient Lucky spots a raft afloat off Martha's Vineyard, and there's movement inside. It's Nathan.
It was clear that he had been out in the water in those elements for more than a week.
These images from that freighter show Nathan wearing a life vest being pulled to safety, but he's clearly alone. Where is Nathan's mother, Linda Carman? Just moments after being rescued, the Coast Guard interviews Nathan. The audio is recorded.
Nathan, this is United States Coast Guard, Boston.
They ask him what happened.
There was a funny noise in the engine compartment. I looked and saw a lot of water. So I got to the life raft after I got my bearings, and I was whistling and calling and looking around. When I saw the life raft, I did not see my mom. Have you found her?
No, we haven't been able to find her yet.
The crew off the Orient Lucky describes Nathan as very sad. It's a heartbreaking scene. a son separated from his mother.
People don't want to immediately cast blame or cast fault on Nathan.
And the empathy felt for Nathan on the water extends back to dry land, where he speaks to the media. Not an easy task for a person with Asperger's.
And I just want to thank the public for their prayers and for their continuing prayers for my mother.
Sadly, with the reality that it's been over a week with no sign of the missing mother, Linda Carman is presumed dead.
Linda Carman was unprotected from the elements. She had no food and water, and there was also no other life raft aboard the chicken pox. The likelihood of her being alive is minimal.
And her body has never been found.
Body's never been found.
After search and rescue gives up on finding Linda alive, authorities turn their focus back to Nathan's account of what happened during those fateful last moments at sea. Dan Small is an attorney representing family members of the missing woman.
Nathan's story goes that he had time to put on a life jacket, pick up a bag of provisions, deploy this huge life raft, but he didn't have time to say, "Hey Mom, you want to come?" Or, "Hey Mom, you want a life jacket?"
And according to Coast Guard reports, a distress signal was never sent out.
And he doesn't apparently bother to flick a switch to do an emergency beacon. He had that equipment on the boat. The whole idea that there was this mysterious sinking, I think, is nonsense.
But according to Nathan, the boat sank in mere minutes, leaving him no time to call for help. And concerning his mother's disappearance, he claims it has left him traumatized.
Emotionally, I've been through a huge amount.
But Linda's family now wonders if the boat accident was indeed an accident at all. When Nathan turns in his insurance claims for the sunken vessel, information surfaces that Nathan was seen by people at the Rhode Island Ram Point Marina doing repairs to his boat hours before the fishing trip with his mother.
He removed the trim tabs, and that leaves holes in the boat, and he put some sort of temporary patching in the boat. There's no rational basis to do it. There's no good reason to do it unless you want to take the boat out and sink it.
It's a strong opinion from the attorney for the family of Linda Carman. But I wanted to see if this was really true, so I went to the same Rhode Island marina where Nathan docked his boat to ask about his boat alterations. A boater who wanted to remain anonymous spoke to me just off camera about the trim tabs that Nathan removed just before the ill-fated fishing trip.
Everything about it is a plus. To remove them is a minus.
Is it dangerous?
To remove it probably would leave holes.
Holes enough to sink a boat?
Give it enough time, a small hole will sink any boat.
Nathan admits he removed the trim tabs, but denies that he intentionally sabotaged the boat, and even goes on to file an $85,000 insurance claim for his lost vessel with 2 different insurance companies. Then this bombshell. Both insurance companies deny his claims, saying the sinking of the boat was not accidental and that there was potential criminal wrongdoing. If true, why would Nathan intentionally sabotage his own boat?
You talk about motive.
He stands to inherit over $10 million.
That's right, Nathan's mother is worth millions. Her father was none other than Connecticut multimillionaire real estate developer John Chakalos. Nathan's grandfather had died just 3 years earlier, leaving an estate worth $42 million to be divided by his 4 daughters, including Nathan's mother, Linda. But Dan Small says with Linda out of the way,
there's a lot of money at stake for him. If you have someone who's a murderer, who's gotten away with it, the question you have to ask is, what's next?
And what's next is a civil lawsuit filed just a few weeks ago by Linda's sisters. There, in black and white, Nathan's own aunts calling their nephew a killer.
And they feel 100% they know who the killer is.
Yes.
But who they say he killed isn't who you think. Coming up,
Nathan Carman was the last person to see his mom and his grandfather alive.
Another suspicious death, and all eyes are on Nathan. And
in any murder case, Melissa, you need means, motive, and opportunity. And here, you have all 3 and more.
What does Nathan have to say about it all? We track him down to ask him.
Hi, Nathan, it's Melissa.
A fishing trip turned tragedy at sea.
The boat is sinking and she disappears.
After an extensive search by the Coast Guard for New England mother Linda Carman,
The likelihood of her being alive is minimal.
her son Nathan Carman says it was a horrible accident and files an insurance claim. It's denied. And according to Dan Small, the attorney for Linda's family,
He tampered with the boat, he cut holes in the boat, he did things that would make the boat essentially easier to sink.
so what really happened on board that boat? Linda's friends say it all starts with a discrepancy about their fishing destination.
Nathan Carman had painted a picture that he was going on a fishing trip about 100 miles off the coast to Block Canyon. But one of Linda Carman's friends was told by Linda that they were actually going to be going on a fishing trip about 20 miles off the coast.
Which meant a shorter trip, better suited for the vessel size and current conditions.
Keep in mind, Nathan and his mom set out on this fishing trip late at night. It was around 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. This is a 31-foot aluminum boat. To set out on a fishing trip late at night with your mom in those conditions is just not of the norm, and many people are still trying to figure out why Nathan would have done that.
Yes, why?
It's a very disturbing question, and it's exactly the right one that you asked.
Turns out,
And there is a past and there is a history.
dating back 3 years before Linda disappeared,
But as reporters began doing more digging,
they uncovered bombshell information, shedding new light on the alleged boating accident.
Nathan Carman was the last person to see two of his relatives alive, not only his mother, Linda Carman, but also his grandfather, John Chakalos.
That's right, some might call Nathan incredibly unlucky, but Dan Small calls him something else.
He's a murderer.
John Chakalos' death is a cold-blooded killing that rocked a quiet Connecticut neighborhood.
It's always on our mind. There's a murder next door to us.
You heard right. Just 3 years before Linda Carman disappeared, there is this headline-making news story. 87-year-old John Chakalos is found dead in his bed by one of his 4 daughters just 5 days before Christmas.
He suffered 3 bullets.
But why would anyone want to kill him? Well, some now wonder if money is the motive. Turns out John was a multi-millionaire real estate investor worth more dead than alive for certain family members.
We learned that his grandfather had an estate to the tune of, I think, $40+ million. Nathan's mother was one of the beneficiaries of that. Now that Nathan's mother is presumed dead, would Nathan become one of those beneficiaries?
Cops get a search warrant for Nathan's home, and it's what they didn't find that piques their interest.
He got rid of his GPS. He got rid of his hard drive.
And his alibi for the night his grandpa is shot dead.
He's not able to account for his time that night.
And there's more.
A high-end $3,000 semi-automatic assault rifle. John Chakalos was murdered in his sleep with 3 shots from a .308 caliber rifle. Nathan had bought a .308 rifle before the murder.
Word spreads fast in the deceased millionaire's safe neighborhood.
Now all of a sudden he has a weapon that's the same caliber as the one that shot John?
But when police plan to run ballistic testing on Nathan's rifle to see if it's a match to the one that killed John Chakalos,
Nathan claims he somehow lost a $3,000 assault rifle. How do you lose it? Did he leave it at the Dunkin' Donuts?
investigators continue to gather evidence speaking to Nathan's neighbors. As noted in this police warrant, one neighbor calls him Murder Boy and another a time bomb waiting to go off. And according to Nathan's own family, they were so scared of him that they hired armed private security to protect them in their homes.
There's a lot of fear.
And people have been wary of Nathan for some time, according to an incident when he was just in high school.
There was a charge that in high school he was waving a knife and essentially held a student hostage briefly at knife point.
Investigators have heard enough and file an arrest warrant for Nathan Carman for the murder of his grandfather.
The police recommended an arrest warrant. The police thought that they had probable cause.
Then
there was some breakdown between the police and the DA. The DA thought they needed something else, and so he was never arrested.
Nathan remains free, and his grandfather's case goes cold. That was until 3 years later and the fateful fishing trip shifting focus back to Nathan Carman. But with more evidence tying Nathan to his grandfather's death and his mother's disappearance, the family's attorney begins to build a case.
That Nathan Carman murdered his grandfather. The gun is the most shocking. The fact that he had the gun, that he lied to the police about it, and that he's now made the gun disappear is both shocking and I think terribly damaging evidence against him.
Then, in an unprecedented move by Linda's 3 surviving sisters, they file a civil motion in New Hampshire probate court against their nephew, known as a Slayer suit.
It's about justice. If, as a result of the Slayer action, Nathan is prevented from inheriting his grandfather's money and that he doesn't get to profit from murder.
Nathan's Aunt Valerie leads the charge.
This person killed at least once that we know of. This person's gotten away with murder, and chances are it will happen again.
In court paperwork, they ask this court to declare that the murderer was Nathan Carman and that Nathan committed this heinous act out of malice and greed. But Nathan's biological father, who is recently back in his life, says his son is innocent.
They're the 2 closest people to my son in the world. And let me just say this, there's no way he would ever injure either one of them.
And then there's the possibility that Nathan's suspicious behavior has more to do with his Asperger's than actual guilt.
Several people have commented on how socially awkward he's been, on some of the things that he said publicly, but then again, people have to keep in mind that he does have Asperger's syndrome.
First and foremost, this case has nothing to do with Asperger's. I think he's troubled, and I think he's a murderer.
Nathan continues to deny any involvement in his grandfather's death or his mother's disappearance. To date, he has not been arrested or charged with any wrongdoing in either investigation. These days, Nathan can be found living alone in a home in Vernon, Vermont. And that's where I got to go get Nathan's side of the story.
Hi, Nathan, it's Melissa. Can I talk to you for a few minutes? Yes, with Chris Hansen, yes. I can barely hear you, Nathan. Okay, we don't want to upset you. I just wanted to ask about a few questions about the lawsuit your aunt's filed.
Nathan asked me to leave, so I do.
You have nothing else to say. Okay.
Nathan has yet to make a public comment on the lawsuit brought against him by his family, but just recently he filed a motion in court to represent himself in the civil case. The homicide of John Chakalos and disappearance of Linda Carman remain open investigations.